Everyone I know listens to podcasts. Anyone who's anyone has their own podcast. You could start your own show even if no one asks. It's easy to record yourself and act like an ass. Murder, sports and politics, histories or movies, heist or technology. There's an audience for everything. Yes, but who on earth will listen to three random Vatos reading books?
I think you should do it.
Okay. Let's do this, right? Starts whenever, right?
God, I love our song. Don't you guys agree?
Well, welcome to our next installment of Three Random Vatos Reading Books. We'll be continuing Pimp by Iceberg Slim. We left off on chapter 6.
7.
And
7. Finish 6.
Shit. Yes. Wait, so we were supposed to finish chapter 12 or read up to chapter 12?
Finish it.
What?
1 through 6 and then 7 through 12.
We're going 6 chapters at a time. Okay, no worries. We'll fill you in when we get
we'll
there.
fill you in on chapter 12. It was a good chapter.
Yeah.
Let's
see.
I did read chapter 12. I'm back. I'm here. Sorry, guys.
You're trying to slide us off the rails already.
Gosh. All right. Be prepared. I said.
Hey man, I liked the thumbnail, by the way. I wonder if that worked because we got a couple of views already.
I don't know.
On the first episode.
I thought it kind of looked like Fight Club too, but it's like Pimp Club, and then it makes you think like, hey, are these guys pimps? What is this about? And then they want to click maybe. That's my thought process.
Yeah.
I think the cowboy hat sold everything.
Yeah, the outfits are ready, and I knew like the outfits like had to be a thumbnail,
Robert to the cowboy hat.
The outfit.
Yeah, it was a cowboy. The cowboy
I'm
hat.
kidding. Yeah, man. Okay, man. Well, honestly, I got
one that specifically had a cowboy hat.
I was pumped though, man, because so you put this episode up yesterday, and I watched it yesterday, and then I got super pumped, so I read it, and I'm like, I've been in that world for a while now.
You start feeling like you're a part of that world, don't you?
Yeah, dude. I can picture his place. I can picture that area of Chicago. I can picture. What was interesting? We'll get to it, obviously, but I think that my favorite chapter was when he goes to Sweet Jones.
Yeah.
His place, and like he lives in a fucking mansion. It seems like he's describing like Great Gatsby, like his place.
Mm-hmm.
Like marble everywhere.
I thought of that too. As it's kind of like elite, but then because they're always like living this crazy life. It has to be nonstop.
Yeah.
And so, anyways, chapter 7 is Melody off key. The runt leaves maybe to make some cash for them, like her and Iceberg. Slim doesn't really know, and then he makes breakfast and does some coke, and then you kind of start to wonder as a reader, like, oh, is he starting to develop a bad habit here? He goes to the funhouse bar, and then he kind of like has this weird interaction with the workers there. I think he kind of senses like that they're trying to be too friendly, and then he like just gets like super street on them, and then there at the bar he meets this lady, and she looks really good to him. Huh?
He bumps into her, and he's like, this. Yeah. He bumps into her, and she's like, oh, my. And he's like, all right, time to work up my magic here, dude. And he's just like, I reckon, okay, I'm literally not going to say anything.
It's like her car, right? It's like her engine.
Yeah, her car's broken. He's like, dude, this is perfect. He's like, listen, I don't know anything about cars, but pop up in that hood and let me see what we're working with here. And they hit it off really well. She's a white lady, and he's kind of really into her. And he's thinking, like, how can I?
He describes her just real quick as like, he's like, I have not seen a beautiful woman like that since the last time I went to the movies or something. Like basically saying like she was as beautiful as like an actress on the screen. Which is important for later. Go ahead, Robert.
So he fixes the car all easily. Oh, go ahead, Robert.
No. Yeah, he fixed the car easily, turns up like a little turn it up, and like, I repay you. And he's like, darling, man of my stature is. He just tries to sweet talk her. He doesn't know what he's gonna. He's just infatuated with her.
He thinks he can get money out of her.
Yeah, he definitely wants money out of her. Kind of into her. They get in the car, and he's like pulling his moves. She's like, I just want to know that you're real. And then she like just jumps him. He's like, that's real, honey. She invites him up to his. Go on.
This was the first time where I started thinking, just because like everything really went his way, right? So like, just bumped into this girl. He gets to play like she's like damsel in distress, and he plays, the knight coming to save her or whatever. And in his head, he's thinking like, okay, let's see if I can charm her. And almost things just go perfectly for him, right? Like she's like totally buying his charm. And I was just thinking like, is this guy like, how much is this guy stretching the truth? Like he's replaying these like things that happened in his life. And I start to wonder, like, that sounds too good to be true from his perspective, but also like it just doesn't seem believable at all. But who knows, man? It was a different time.
It was too easy from like the car being like, oh, it was a simple like. He didn't know anything about cars, but saw that something was just loose, puts it in, and then she's just willingly. I know it's like a different era, but it still seems like
So she's a white. Yeah. She's a white, classy woman, he describes, and he even says that he's looking particularly like disheveled and kind of like he had been saying that he just like, I think he smelled that day and shit, and yet his charm still works on her, and she's like, hop in, like I'll drive you to wherever you want to go, and then on the way, like, okay, how much? What can I say? And so he starts charming her, and he says, I have to try to be sweet to her. So he starts making up this story about like how down on his luck he is.
He's like thinking of like, how am I gonna con her? Like on the way as he's driving, he's like, what? How should I start my story? Like, what?
Yeah, and like Robert said at one point, one of the last things he says to her before she makes a move is, she's like, oh, please don't. He's like, please don't leave me and prove to me that this is like, I don't know. He's just saying like that, like you just like snuck in here, or like you just like came into my life at the most opportune time because I'm like super down on my luck and you're just super beautiful and all this. And she's like, oh, I'm Maria. And then like Robert says, she leans in and just like makes out with him. And it's like, what? Like this wouldn't happen now, man. But I mean, even less so then. But anyways, whatever, his perspective.
You know what?
And
I hung out with my friend Randy, who's the one who actually recommended me read this book. And then he said that he kind of had an encounter like that too, with like some random lady on the street. And then I was wondering, like, maybe that lady was pretending to be a man, kind of like how it ends up with Iceberg and this lady.
Spoiler alert. Okay, let's work up there. Who wants to go into that story?
Well, I mean, it's so weird. Well, the drive over, like as he's going, I thought the most interesting part, or like one of the most interesting parts, was he just described like she lived a long way from the black concentration camp, like where he's at. And then he said the white world was like leaving hell and riding through heaven. And like it just kind of like it's like a whole new thing he's never seen before. This is his like Aladdin magic carpet ride.
Yeah, dude, that's pretty interesting commentary that he mentions. It gets even more in a few chapters from now. But yeah, just like thinking about the black experience at that time, and he describes how he's like, man, very, very few black people will ever even know the heaven that exists as they start approaching her her residential area. And he starts like talking about how nice everything is, and the courtyards and the grass and the houses and the cars and everything. And he's just like, man, he keeps saying the white man's world, right? And so there's this clear thing where he understands that his place in the world as he sees it is like he's trying to escape from the black just like situation of, just like they've just escaped slavery, like this is only a few decades removed from slavery being a thing. And it's just kind of sad, man. He's just like that. And that's why he's trying to be a pimp, right? It's just like, this is the only way I know how like, cause he's like, I don't want to be working for like a white man, being like a cook or like a server somewhere.
He has a great speech, like in I think it's the next chapter or the one after that, where he's talking about, like, he's like praying to God. But in this chapter though, he just is,
so they
like,
get to her place.
Yeah, by like the quality of life difference between the whites and the blacks, and then she starts claiming that her life is very hard. And I thought that part was really funny because it's like, oh, of course, this fucking bitch, you know. It's like, blood baby, I'm white, but I've been more unhappy than any black person all of my life. And then she says like her parents would just give her whatever she wanted, and you know how she's so miserable.
Yeah.
And then she starts talking about her flaw.
Well, okay, so let's build it up a little bit, right? Because it was totally surprising to me. I didn't expect it, right? And so they get to her place, and she sneaks him in through the back, and she's like, everyone, all my neighbors know me. And if anyone were to know that I brought in a black man, they would disown me before they died, you know? And so she brings him in, and I guess it's worth mentioning, like, his sob story, which he had said to try to just like get on her good side, was like, he was like, I'm down on my luck. I'm here in town looking for work. And like, my mom is super sick, and I was here to try to make money so that she could pay for her surgery. But if I don't pay for that in the next week or so, then she's just going to die. And so he's still trying to work that angle. And so he's there, and he's like, he starts giving her that con again. And so she brings out a piggy bank, right? And
how old is this person? Like, I already know it's art.
In my mind at first, I was like, cool, man, like Slim. It feels bad to root for the guy, but I was like, cool, man, like she's hot, she's like a woman, she's bringing him back to his place. And then the more he described it, I was like, this is like a little girl, man.
It was weird. Yeah, she kept on saying like, my parents aren't home until tomorrow. I'm like, no, dude.
Yeah.
Iceberg is probably at that age too, where he's like a really young person.
That's true too. So at the very very end of our 6 chapters here, he says that he's just turning 20, and that to me was like, holy shit, he's still so young. I had forgotten that he was still like super young.
But then you learn with like this person, it's almost like a little bit of, I guess it did kind of make sense, because at first you scoff that she's like, I've had it harder than anybody, but then like as like somebody who was actually transgender at that time, like it's possible that life was, you know, even more difficult for them, even if they were, I don't know. I mean, it just like.
So there it is, everyone. She's transgendered, and they start kind of, so she kind of agrees to help him out. She gives him a piggy bank, and he's thankful. And he's like, okay, now I'm going to have sex with you and like show you the ropes basically. And he's thinking, he's like, I'm going to tie her up and like do all the nasty shit that I've done to other girls, right?
Yeah.
And so she comes back into the room after like changing, and she's like in her lingerie, and she's like covered, right? She's like, cause he mentions, he's like, this is weird. She has like no hair down there. And then when he gets closer, he realizes that there's something up there, and he takes it off, and then she's already like kind of tied up at that point, and she's like, don't hate me.
Yeah, she's like, I have a flaw, or it's like, hey, there's nothing to worry about. I got this. And like, nothing is gonna scare me. Go ahead.
But by then they had already like started making out and stuff. So he was like disgusted by it, like, because he was just so shocked, and he was like, oh God, and he calls her names, of course, the F word, and so he
says, you stinky sissy son of a bitch.
Oh yeah, he called her sissy. That was the thing, and so but he's just like mad and disgusted that.
And then she throws out the N-word a few times too, in retaliation.
Yeah, and so it's just like this funny situation. This kind of felt like a filler chapter, to be honest.
Yeah,
it was a funny encounter for sure, but like not necessarily pivotal to like the story.
Like somehow, and it might, I don't know,
maybe. But yeah, so anyways,
like the main point of this chapter was to show the difference between like the heaven and the hell of like the black and the white world, and then also I think to show you just like how like unpredictable and crazy his life is, where he's going and, you know, like making out with a man at one point, or like a, you know, woman, or, you know.
Yeah. And yeah, so I mean, that's really it. Like, so he just leaves, and she's like left kind of still tied up, and so he just like leaves her, and like that's kind of it, right? He shows up back to to Phyllis, and that's kind of it.
Yeah, and then they kind of just smoke weed, and then she had made some money for him, and I think that's
continues to be her, and there's never good dialogue.
Yeah. So this next chapter I think is like probably the most important chapter as far as like how things advance. So who wants to talk about that?
Talk about why you think it's so important.
Well, yeah. Really? That's when so like that happened. We're moving on, right? So Glass Top, who is Sweet Jones's friend and Pimp number 2, right? Like number 2 in the Pimp totem pole. He randomly calls up Slim and he's like, hey, get ready in 15 minutes. I'm on my way. And Slim had apparently been waiting for his call, but he wasn't expecting it for another few days or something. So he was just like, holy shit, okay. And he got ready real quick, gets in there, and on the way over, Glass Top lets him know, he's like, there's a fight in town, like a boxing fight, I guess. And after, we're going to have an after party at Sweet Jones's place, number 1 Pimp. And there are going to be a lot of pimps and whores there. And so I had called Sweet Jones earlier today, and I told him about you, saying that you were my nephew and that I was going to bring you in and that you wanted to be a pimp. And he told me to bring you in so that he could kind of talk to you. And then, which is what Slim wanted, right? And so on the way there, Glass also goes into Sweet Jones's story. I don't know if we should get into that. It was interesting, but I don't know if it was necessarily.
Well, yeah, I think it's important too. But I think Glass Top, before that, he starts sharing like this like pimp philosophy, and then he starts bragging about how he's driven 3 whores crazy to the loony bin, and then he's like, what's his name? Sweet Jones has only done 1 girl crazy, and then yeah, he goes into Sweet Jones's story where he talks about how his it's like his mom, right, is raped by a plantation owner's son or something.
Yeah.
And then,
just to go back real quick to your thing, that left me pretty speechless too, man. Like that was like another one of those like, damn, this is just such a brutal world where what Glass Top described was literally driving a few girls to suicide.
Yeah.
And like that's what we're talking about, not just like they're fucking crazy. Like he fucking like intentionally and systematically drove them fucking nuts by. I'm trying to think of the specific things which I didn't quite write down. Do you guys remember exactly?
What?
I guess it's not super important.
Well, like how he did it, like where he would get like hooked on drugs too. I think too, kind of like how Sweet Jones did that.
At one point, he drugged one of them and woke her up by hanging her from her ankles from like a 3-story like floor or something. And then as soon as they woke up, he would like give them lies about like why they were in those situations, and he would just like make up shit, but like to really fuck with their heads. And then at one point he said he like injected chicken blood in them. I didn't know if that was like
no, I think he's like being real, like that's what he did just to drive him crazy.
Yeah, so it was just fucked up, and I was like, damn. But okay, yeah. So
he was doing it too, I guess, like in his mind, because like they were getting like too big for the britches, or like they weren't making money anymore, so they were going kind of crazy, and it's just like a way to maintain the order in your stable of whores.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So should I go into Sweet's backstory real quick?
Yeah, because I think it's important because he's one of the biggest characters in the novel so far, and then like we've heard Iceberg Slim's origin story, and then this is like Sweet Jones's origin story too.
So we knew a couple chapters back, the last episode, I don't think we talked about it, but it was covered in those chapters where Sweet Jones apparently has like a real like he really doesn't like white people, right? Like he's like beating up a few white people, and Glass Top's mentioned like,
worse, the white horse.
Yeah. And so he's just like really crazy with them. And we know now why, which is let's see. Damn. Okay, so Sweet Jones's mom was raped by a white villager somewhere, right? Wherever he grew up. Somewhere in the South.
Son.
Okay, yeah. In the South, of course. And she came back home, and when Sweet Jones's dad found out, and he was like a 7-foot, 300-pound dude, he went out to find the guy that raped her, and he like beat him so close to death, but not quite leaving him dead. And then he came back home and just kind of cleaned up and stuff. And apparently that guy was found by like some other guy who was like out hunting or something. Mm-hmm. And they, I guess, told on him. So a mob formed and they came back to him and they raped the mom and they essentially lynched Sweet Jones's dad, right?
They hung him out on the tree, yeah.
In front of, and he saw everything. He was like, I think he was hiding somewhere, but he was kind of seeing everything. And that's what happened. So like, and it was like, oh, just, you know, obviously like a white on black crime at the time. And so he was just super pissed, and so he's held that apparently. And then he escaped, and that's when he. And then
his mom went crazy, and then she goes to the they call it the funny farm, and then Sweet, his first whore is like a teenager, like a 19-year-old, and then he drives her to suicide when she's 19. You know, and then we learn, I don't know, just
oh yeah,
lots of bad shit.
Really, so you guys haven't figured that out by now.
Yeah, for sure. And so this was all happening on the way to Sweet Jones's place, right? The just like the spontaneous trip there, and it took like an hour to get there, so it was quite a long conversation, it seems. And then they get there, and that's, again, I'm thinking in my mind, it's like when you first meet Gatsby in The Great Gatsby, when you show up to the mansion and there's like a party going on. There wasn't exactly a party here, but just go ahead.
I was thinking Sweet Jones is like played by Dave Chappelle, as like Dave Chappelle played Rick James, kind of. Like that's the kind of vibe I was getting from Sweet.
I got more of what's that? Damn, I'm gonna forget it. I don't remember his name. He died, unfortunately, but he's a big black actor. He was in The Green Mile, I think, right? What's that? Huh?
Michael Clark Duncan.
Yeah. So I just thought like a
Sweet Jones.
Yeah, because he was just like a really stoic dude, right? He's like I don't smile, like that's not what pimps do.
He gets mad at Iceberg a whole lot for grinning.
Yeah, so different interpretations there, Robert, but Rick James and that guy. But it's interesting. So they get to the house and it
was the same attitude, maybe not the same like build, but kind of like,
yeah.
He's around him for smiling. I don't know.
But they get there and it's like, I just picture like a mansion. It's obviously not a mansion. It's like an apartment building.
I think it's just like an expensive apartment.
But there's like a door guy. There's like a car guy. There's, you know, it's just like I don't know. It just seems pretty upscale.
Higher end place.
And but then when they do finally get up to the elevator to get to Sweet Jones's spot, and apparently it's not super important, I guess, but Sweet Jones owns the whole building, or at least is in charge of the whole building.
Yeah, some white lady, I think, is like paying him or something to, like run it.
And all the tenants are white, and he's I think the only black guy, but he's like in charge of everything. And so they get to his place, and it's like this crazy thing again, where there's like this like great big foyer, I guess, and then
just like hustlers and gamblers everywhere.
Yeah, and there's like a crazy fountain, and there's like a statue of some sort that he describes. And then finally they get to like the living area where Sweet Jones is, and he's just like kind of sitting down on the couch with the what is it again?
Ocelot.
Yeah, but what's her name? Sweet Peaches.
Miss Peaches.
Yeah. And okay, and then so what happens?
Robert, you want to go for a little bit?
They're kind of like hey, bro, I'm gonna take you under my wing. Well, Sweet Face is kind of
Sweet Jones.
Sweet Jones. What did I say? Sweet Face.
Sweet Face.
You were describing him,
bro. Okay. Iceberg Slim is like wanting more than just one horse, so he's just like, okay, I don't know why I was just told this backstory all the way here, but I need to kind of like make an impression here. I can't really mess this up. Sweet Jones is kind of my ticket. He's kind of my, I want to be his protege. And that is kind of what Sweet Jones does, kind of take that position.
And it's because Glass Top is pretending that he's his nephew or something. Like he's like, he can't help it. He wants to be a pimp, my nephew.
Yeah. So they're playing this like weird psychology thing on Sweet Jones, trying to like you said, Glass Top is trying to say like, oh, I'm trying to keep him from the game. I don't think he can handle it. He's kind of a pussy. And Sweet Jones is like, I don't know. I think he's gotten in him, you know, and he's just convinced him how to want to help him.
And he tells him just like, you know, like if you stop grinning, you know, maybe. And then they go and like they go off and package drugs, right, for Patchai to sell. And then, man.
So they leave him alone, right?
The saddest pages, like in literature, I feel like, is like this page where he's like just begging God and like talking to God. Like where he like at one time like believed in him, but then nowadays wasn't really. But then he's like praying, like in this moment where he's like in this new world. And he's like, God, I don't want to be a stick-up man or a dope peddler. And, you know, I won't be as bad as those other guys making the whores go crazy. And plus, whores are rotten anyways. And then he says, I'm not going to croak them or drive them crazy. I'm just going to pimp some real type of living out of them. And he's like, if you're listening, just one thing for me. Don't let me croak before I live some and get to be somebody down here in the white man's world. I don't care what happens after that. He just wants the success that he sees, you know, and it's almost unattainable. But it makes him start believing in God again, you know, just that he's there, I guess.
Yeah, it is interesting. That was I didn't quote any of it, but I should have, because it was pretty interesting. He was just like he again talks about like the black experience, and he says that he doesn't believe in God anymore, but he's like he still prays for him just in case, I guess. And he's like, I know you're not black, but yeah, maybe one day you'll come down and show like the white people that we're your sons too.
Maybe he'll kill all the rats in the black ghettos and
yeah, but he's like I can't take that chance, so I got to do what I got to do, you know, and that's pimping to him. Like that he sees that as his way out of the black situation. But yeah, so he's out there because they had left him alone, like you said, Sweet Jones and Glass Top go, and I think they're preparing drugs for the party that's about to happen. Yeah, and he's just out there.
Like the wizards have pimped him, like all around him. That seemed like a Chappelle Show sketch, like the player hater.
Oh yeah, that whole scene really did feel like Rick James, like that black room, everyone partying kind of thing. But so he comes back in after being like introspective and reflective outside, because he was out in the balcony. He comes in, and by then like people have started to kind of make their way in, right? And so there are pimps and whores already, and immediately there's one whore who just like kind of makes a beeline to him, and she's like an old whore.
And she has everything like on her leg, on her face, like just he's like describing everything about her, and he's just like, bro, I don't want any part of this. And she's like, you're gonna get me, and I don't care what you say about it. He's like, no.
Yeah, she's like, I want your dick, and like come with me. And he's trying to like
off his dick at one point. I think like if you don't sleep with me, I'm gonna cut you.
Yeah, and so what he's thinking the whole time, he's like, Sweet Jones is looking at me, right? While this girl's approaching me, and he's got to show that to Sweet Jones. Like he's like, I do have it in me to be like a real pimp. But Sweet Jones has seen him, and she's obviously like just way more experienced, and he even says, he's like, damn, I don't know what to fucking say to this girl. But let's see what else happens.
So
should we just go to the restroom thing?
And like saves his ass. Like he sees.
Well, he goes to the restroom, right? That's what he does, and she follows him there.
He's like, I should have locked the door, because she like beat for him, and pretty much just starts taking advantage of him, and then that's when Sweet Face saves him. And if I'm getting this right, doesn't he kind of also like beat the shit out of Iceberg Slim? Like, get you, dude. Like,
yeah,
stop grinning, or else I'll like.
Well, because he said, yeah. So Sweet Jones comes in and like smacks the girl, and he's like, "Get out of here! He's with me." She leaves, and then he like shoves him into the wall, and he's like, "You know why this is happening to you? Because you don't stop fucking grinning. You can't grin. You're a pimp. That's why they're taking advantage of you. That's why she's taking advantage of you." And then so he basically like he kind of knocks him out, right? Because he's like, he says that he like kind of woke up and he was seeing like the legs and stuff. And then that's when Glass Top finds him, and he's like, "Hey, just go get my car. I'll be right out. You know, go wait for me in the car, pull it up, and I'll be right out." And then what happens outside?
Man, you would think that the night couldn't get any worse for poor Iceberg. And then as he's leaving, go ahead, Robert, take it over.
Yeah, he's just waiting in the car, ready to go, and then out of nowhere, he just feels a head gets slammed in. A bunch of cops are just taking him and just beating the shit out of him, taking him out of the car, and he has no identification. They're asking for it, and then Glass Top saves the day by mentioning Sweetface's name, and they're like, "Oh, why didn't you just say so?" So here we find out that Sweetface has a what is his name? I'm saying Sweetface.
Sweet Jones.
I was just letting you keep going.
Sweet Jones.
But that was.
Sweet Jones has some pull wherever he's at. Even the cops are just kind of, kind of bought.
That was a really violent, like Black Lives Matter kind of moment, though, right? Like the way he described it, which was interesting because like this was written '69, or published at least then, but like he essentially described just like cops harassing him violently,
kicking his ass,
pulling him out of his car, and like just like asking for stuff and his
shit out of him. Yeah, like didn't even give him a chance. I think they hit him first. And
they hit him with a flashlight, and like he talks about like feeling like shards of glass everywhere.
I think he beat up so bad, like he shits himself.
Yeah. So it was just intense. But then then party, not party time.
I bet you there's some people out there in the world that think like, oh, maybe this guy deserves it. Like, what an asshole. He's been through this whole book. But then fucking Glass Top comes, saves his ass by mentioning Sweet Jones, the other pimp, and then these guys are of course like in his payroll, and that's how they're like they're like, oh, okay, whatever, and then so they just leave, like, like, so there's no justice, no nothing, they just kick some dude's ass for no reason.
Yeah. So police brutality has been a thing, obviously, for quite some time.
Brings us into
Documented
chapter 9,
here.
The Butterfly.
Yeah. This one kind of felt like a filler episode 2, or a filler chapter 2.
Well,
not really, I guess.
So like it kind of starts off with the runt, and she's kind of like rummaging around and like looking for stuff, and she's kind of hasn't been bringing in the money, and then she starts talking about how like a couple of cops were harassing her and kind of like forced themselves onto her, and then she was like had to service both of them, and then Slim is all like upset, like he's like, I can't believe you fell for that, and then he like kicks her out to go make some money. And then he goes across the hall, and then there's like this horn player, Scarface, and then he leaves without his girlfriend. I think he had mentioned his girlfriend before this chapter, right? Or
yeah.
Before he's met.
They had been stealing glances.
Yeah, so her name is Chris. And then so Slim calls her up, and then we've seen what a smooth operator he is, and then she comes over. And then we kind of learn about her, and then why maybe she's susceptible to this kind of stuff, where like her mom.
Go ahead, Robert. Yeah, her backstory is that I guess her mom left. Is that what happened first? Her mom left.
Her mom died.
Her mom died.
Disease or something.
Yeah, her dad had her sleep with him, and that turned into sexual abuse, rape, all that stuff. So she obviously had all these problems with eating, and so she got pregnant by her dad, and she left. She went on and left and had a miscarriage and met Scarface.
Well, she starts working for some other pimp, and then I think Scarface, the horn player, like saves her from that life, and I think they go and they're married, or they get married.
He's a decent dude. She was really in love with him. She says, I'm so in love with him, or I was so in love with him. Now I no longer feel that love. He was a great looking man before the accident. There was something that happened at the company he worked for, and they're supposed to be getting a settlement. Yeah. So like he's this big.
But this is one of those examples of like things just like working out perfectly for him, where I was like, how smooth is this guy, man? Really? Because what happened was I guess he has binoculars, right? He keeps saying like, I think he calls them like spy something, but like binoculars, or just like the. Yeah. So he goes out to like his window or balcony to look at Phyllis, right, the runt, and when he's like spying on her, he realizes that this guy Leroy, the husband of this girl Chris, had just left, and so that's when he had the idea of like, holy shit, like he's gone. Mm-hmm. Let me try to bring her up. And then he calls us
like the help to there at the hotel, and he's like, or at the place, and he's like, hey, be on the lookout for me, okay? I'll give you some money. And then I think the guy asked him like, hey, if anything happens, could you like let me watch a little or something?
Yeah. Because he was like, I'm gonna what's the term he says? I'm gonna like I'm gonna lay it on her, whatever, like try to pimp her or whatever. And so he knows the elevator guy, So that's kind of funny because he was actually the one that told Slim initially about her backstory. He gave him the rundown, right?
Yeah.
And that's why he even knows that she was a whore to begin with at some point, a prostitute.
About how everything was. Sorry, you were saying about like everything was just going too good to be true. Where because she was like, okay, I guess so. I'll go over and meet you. And once they meet each other, she's just already in love with him. She's spilling her heart out to someone who she hasn't met. Like, I used to love him. I don't love him. This is my backstory. I'm getting a lot of money. You're so like perfect. It was just like, okay.
She's obviously like really fucked up as we know, like her life story. But yeah, even before then though, Robert, like when he calls her, he is like, hey girl, like, you know who I am? And she's like, no, who are you? And she's like, I'm the guy that lives like right there, right in the hallway. And she's like, oh. And he at one point says something like, you know me, like I've been the guy that you've been dreaming about.
Yeah.
I've been the guy in your dreams. Yeah, and she's just like eating it all up.
But you got to think too that you got to just like assume it's kind of like an abusive relationship that she's in, and so this guy's coming out as a savior because this other dude won't even let her like talk to anybody. He kind of keeps her locked up and away from other people. And so
yeah, she said that he
like a savior at this point.
She said that she hadn't talked to another man in 2 years.
Yeah, and that's crazy.
She was so.
Yeah. And then, but so Leroy, like she's telling Iceberg that he might go on tour and that she'll be here alone, and then that would be like a good opportunity. And then Scarface comes back, the horn player, and then he gets Chris, or like they get Chris like across the section or something. Like they get enough time from the staff there, but then Leroy comes and then he notices like a little butterfly on the floor, like a decoration, and then I think
the butterfly was something that was on her. It was like part of her
outfit.
Dress or something. Yeah. So like he knows what's up. And when he sees it, he tries to confront Slim. He like goes and like beats on his door, and he's kind of freaked out. Slim is, and so he answers. And he's like, "What? I'm on the phone. They're trying to tell me something about my murder or something." He's like, "I just murdered someone." Like, "What do you want? I'm not in a good mood." And that's when he notices the thing on the floor, the little flower, and I think he just like at that point kind of breaks down and he just like goes back. And then.
It's so great, right? Like the way it's written, like it's so entertaining, and like you picture it like a movie, like just everything that happens.
They're like, yeah, there's such great scenes if it were to actually happen. That's why kind of it's like, did this really happen, Vato? But
well, I think he obviously makes it more entertaining, and then anybody like in their own mind, I think in their memory makes themselves look better than it actually was, like in the moment. And I'm sure it like took more time, but you just can't put every boring detail like in there, you know?
For sure.
Condensed.
What I think is going on maybe is like he's obviously like a pretty smart guy, right? So I'm assuming that just like when he had the opportunity to write a book or when he decided to, he was like, fuck it, like I'm gonna make this entertaining, you know?
I mean, it is super entertaining, so he did a good job. Yeah. And then I think the last thing that happens is like the runt comes back, and she's kind of like, I'm afraid of white tricks now because the cops are looking after me, like they're gonna bust me. And then that leads us into the next chapter, the unwritten book.
Well, can I just mention one more thing?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Christine, the girl, she calls him back, I think that night, if not the next day. And he's like, she's like, hey, I can't talk long. Leroy's asleep, my husband, but I want to be with you. Like, just give me some time. I'm trying to figure this out. He's going to go away on a tour or something. And I want to be like a prostitute for you. Cause like they had talked about that earlier. And so he's like, fuck yeah, like, cool. But then like that doesn't happen, obviously. So yeah.
And then I guess it's also interesting to note that she had already been saved from a previous abusive relationship with her father, and then the pimp that saved her while she was pregnant, and then again, and then it's happened. Like this is another opportunity for her, you know, like it would be the fourth time.
Yeah, man, everyone just has like such fucked up lives. It's sad.
Yeah.
But yeah. Okay, chapter 10.
This is your favorite chapter, and I think it's also my favorite chapter too.
Wait, who are you talking to?
But didn't you say this was your favorite chapter?
I don't think I did, but it is my favorite chapter.
Tell me why.
Yeah, super short chapter, but like very pivotal, right? Because this is when Sweet Jones drops the knowledge on him. So what happens? So like going off on like the Phyllis is kind of like she's too scared to do anything, right? So like So the chapter starts by Slim being desperate. He's like, fuck, dude, I don't have that much money.
And then the
Phyllis
rest
has,
like on her period. She's like, oh, I'm too sick. I can't.
yeah.
Mm.
Like she's been laying in bed for 5 days. So not making money.
And then Glasstop is out of town, and so he doesn't know like how to get advice. But somehow he gets Sweet Jones on the phone, and then Slim's like, I'm gonna starve out here if you don't pull my coat. And then Iceberg eventually, Sweet Jones is eventually like, all right, bring some barbecue over and maybe we'll talk.
Yeah, and he said he was in a good mood too, because that seems kind of uncharacteristic of Sweet Jones.
Yeah.
But he was just like, yeah, come on over, man. I'll bring some barbecue and I'll pull your coat.
And he tells him, don't grin.
Yeah, he's like, if you grin, I will throw you out to my balcony. Yeah, so he gets there. He shows up to the house, which is now familiar to me. I feel like I know the place already just based on that one chapter. And he's going up like he knows the place. There's a different elevator girl, and he, whatever. Like he's just going up the place, and he finds Sweet Jones again by the couch, just like chilling with Peaches. And
he asks him to bring over some chicken from a barbecue joint on the way. So
yeah,
he's expecting it.
Yeah, and I don't know if I don't know what, like, again, this is part of like, did this really fucking happen? But the way he describes it is like he walks in and it's Sweet Jones again and Peaches, and he says that like Peaches goes up to him, grabs the bag of chicken and like throws it on the table for Sweet Jones. I was like, is this a fucking cartoon, man? What's going on? But yeah, but it was.
It's so Sweet Jones is like, just give me your life story. Like it's gonna be his like evening's entertainment while he eats his dinner. And then so Slim tells him everything, like up to what we've read. And then Jones starts breaking down the history of the pimp game. And he says it's like former slaves that became hip to the pimp game. Like once they got out of the plantation life, they moved to the city, and like it's like you had to become hip to the lifestyle fast if you wanted to succeed. Otherwise, it's like you were saying where you're just dealing like as like janitors or like the tedious menial work in the world.
Well, what was interesting to me is like he the way he frames what pimping is like to Sweet Jones, in his mind, he's framed pimping, and I don't know if this is historically accurate, but it kind of seems intuitively like this could have been the case. But he says like white slave owners had been having sex with black slaves for forever, right? Like that's the thing that we know of, that is historically. And so what he said was that there were certain black men who became hip to that and then said, you know what, like I'm going to start pimping them out so that I can make money off that fact, right? And it was almost like a psychological kind of like there was like a hatred towards the white people for doing that, given that like the way he says that he's like he almost, I think he called it like a disease or something. He's like, they don't even know that they're so fucked up in the head. They're saying that we're worthless and that they're doing all this, and yet they're out here and they have this like really weird psychological impulse, like deep impulse to want to go have sex with black women because their white wives are not able to give them that sort of pleasure. So it's very likely just like that they're able to have like more explicitly crazy sex with the slaves at that time and later on just like black women.
I think he's talking about like also like the sneakiness of it, of like sneaking away from like their perfect little lives and then going like to this area where like it's like dirty, but it's like dirty because of the way society's been and kind of like pushing down these people. But he likes to like sneak in there, and then he says he wallows and stains himself. That the poor freak's joy is in his suffering. The chump believes he's done something dirty to himself. He slips back into his white world. He goes on conning himself that he's God, and the N-words are filthy animals that he has to keep in stockades. So it's like, like they relish keeping you locked up and then going and taking what they can and just, like living this like secret double life.
But that's why it seemed to me like Sweet Jones felt like he was superior to them, because he was like, I'm taking advantage of their own fucked up like pathology.
I'm getting their money.
Yeah, because they're so fucked up. So, I mean, whether that's true or not, as far as like that really being like a psychological thing, from Sweet Jones' perspective, it seems like it's almost like he's thinking of it as him being more superior to them because
He
he's
takes it all very seriously too, like the role and. Go ahead.
And even society wide, what he recognizes too is he's like, pimps were the first successful black people in America. That's an interesting point that I never really thought about.
Crazy. That's true.
I don't know how historically accurate that is, but that seems like it could be true, right? Just like in terms of like who, like if you think of like who the wealthiest people were at a certain time, black people, he even alludes one time, he's like, it's not doctors or lawyers, which I'm sure there were very few black people who were that, but he's like the pimps, man. The pimps were able to systematically take advantage of this phenomenon going on and then start making money for themselves and like create real wealth for themselves. So he sees it as this like noble profession. And that's how he's explaining it to Slim, who's just eating it up. He's like, fuck yeah, like that totally makes sense.
Because even like in the entertainment industry in that time or you know, like whatever avenue they could have had, it's still the white man's world, like no matter what is where they're at, you know, like if it's like a legal profession. And because this is kind of like a hidden alley profession or like, you know, like they're not paying taxes or anything for it.
What do they say? This is the oldest like profession in the world, right? Like I don't think they say that here, but that's a saying, right?
Well, speaking of, sorry, I'm just like let me just sidetrack here a bit with like Kanye's rant about the music industry. It just kind of made me think about what you're talking about, Marcus, about like you know, Kanye the artist, but like the music industry is run by like these other powerful, rich, like white men, and just trying to exploit these artists. And you know, I know Kanye has been off like tracks lately, but yeah, I know like recently he's just been like trying to expose the music industry, and I'm sure there's a lot of merit to that. And just
you're right. I mean, it's going on in that industry, and it's going on in nearly every industry, like especially in America.
Even more kind of explicit examples of that, I think, and this is something that I think we're kind of all into, but especially Marcus is like fighting, because it's just a more physical thing. It's like you're taking these like ultra athletic people and having them beat themselves to hopefully make some money for them, but it's like, who's really making money off that, right?
Yeah, the way they talk about the whores in this book, it's kind of reminds you of like the way they talk about like cars, but then I also think it's exactly like Dana White treats like the fighters in the UFC, where it's just like, you got to make the scratch while you can, you know, like maybe you have a 10-year gap, maybe it's smaller than that, but like if there's money to be made, you got to make it with these people while they're able to do it.
Yeah, I looked up some of the people that Kanye was ranting about just out of curiosity. It was a lot of like the executives from Universal's parent company, whose name I forget, but it's like some French brand or a French like conglomerate. And yeah, it was just like some random like fat white dude. And it's like, why the hell is this like, does this guy get to make money off of like Kanye's creativity? Like, I'm not going to pretend I know the economics of that industry, but like surely something's messed up there, right?
The guy who does the creative shit should be the one getting paid the most.
For sure.
Common sense. But and then after talking about like the history of pimps and the unwritten book, he gives them some like hard advice like to follow. And he says basically go home and beat up the runt with a coat hanger, and then make her think that they're sending in money from other places. Like you got more whores out there that they don't even know about. Like they don't even know like all that you're up to.
So he's like so he's like, the money that you make off of her, once you implement what I'm going to tell you, which is like to beat her with the hanger, she's going to start making money, and take that money and then go to like a Wells Fargo or something like far away, and like send yourself money from another name to make the girl think that you have another prostitute, so that she can think that she has competition. And yeah.
Don't like vulnerable with her. Don't share any kind of emotion with her. This is just like strictly business. You have to be in charge the whole time, and you really have to give her these pills afterwards to kind of ease her pain.
Oh yeah, the pills too.
Up a bit, because you're going to give her some. Yeah, it was pretty terrible with the coat hanger.
The two other pieces of advice were no more weed for her, because apparently weed makes whores lazy, and then also not to confine her to just one block, to like let her whore around anywhere and everywhere. And yeah, and so
yeah, he also, and if something happens with that, like I guarantee I will have one whore ready for you. I have one for you here. So it was kind of like, Sorry,
She
go ahead.
tells him to like, or he tells him, if she leaves, like, it was going to happen anyways. Like, it's worth it to try it out and see what happens.
And when he sends him off, he's like, I want you to know that I think of you as my son. And I was like, what? Where's this coming from? But he's like, patting him.
I just think like they don't really have like too many people that are close to them. And then like, if you have somebody willing to go and ask for your help and then like try to follow your advice. I mean, like he tells them too, like, I'll never forget this, like in my 30 years. And then, I mean, he stuck to his word, you know, like he wrote this book.
Yeah. And you have to imagine too that like hearing the advice that Sweet Jones has given him, like he also likely doesn't have very many like personal relationships. Like all the horrors that are surrounding him, like he's got to be cold to them too. So there's not like a real emotional foundation there. So yeah, maybe that's totally like merited to be like,
It's kind of like Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant, you know, like where it's like a just one of the greatest, but then they're kind of like ice cold and almost like mean to the people around them. But they did it all for the sake of like the profession or winning.
And you see the person coming up who has the same hunger and like want to be great. And in this case, it's just like pimping. Oh, okay. Well, it's like Sweet Jones being Michael Jordan going
like modern day. But I was like, where's this?
Yeah. So yeah, that was a pretty interesting. It was a very short, like it was literally like less than 10 pages probably this chapter, but a lot.
And I think the next chapter is even shorter. And it opens up with action. Yeah. Robert, break it down.
Yeah, pretty much. This is the last chapter I read. Pretty much, he took his advice. He's like, this is also sad. She comes in, she's like, hey, I'm feeling better, and he's like, not today.
Not anymore. You're not.
And he like pretty much just throws her to the bed and orders her to lay on the bed and just gets that coat hanger and starts whipping her and leaves lashes on her. Gets pretty bad, and she starts saying "wow, wow." However, it's like worded in the book, "owie." No, but it's pretty bad. Like sad. You're whipping the shit out of her, and takes her to the shower, takes her to the bath, gives her the pills, and kind of tells her to, after that, just to get ready and go on out and roam the streets and try to make that money. Yeah.
Well, she starts like begging for forgiveness and calling herself like a dumb bitch and like, yeah, you got a whore, don't worry about it. And then she's like, help me up. And then Iceberg starts saying, I felt tears roll down my cheeks. Maybe I was crying in joy that I broke her spirit. I felt sorry for her. I wondered if I was falling in love like a sucker. And then he kisses her and carries her to bed. And it's just like this, like, you know, like almost impossible to put yourself into these like rapidly changing mentalities that these people have to be in, like to live this type of life.
Yeah, man. The just like, wow, what am I trying to say? The highs and lows of like the emotions that they deal with are just insane.
It's like complex and just like
just
hard to see.
Like,
well, I guess yeah. Like I don't know about highs, just a lot of lows, a lot of fucking lows.
Yeah, I haven't felt a real high in this book, but it just seems emotionally draining, and then you just feel bad just for all the abuse going around, and like I know even like the person doing the abusing was abused their whole life, so it's just like the cycle that you see, and it's just really kind of tragic. Anyway, but yeah, that chapter was kind of short and sweet, and just kind of took his advice and did that, and she left on her way.
Yeah, and I think he starts taking drugs, and then he starts thinking about Chris, the lady who's dating the horn player, and then he even starts thinking about Melody, who's like the first person we read about in this section, and like he just is like seems like in this like weird needing love or some type of something, and he feels abandoned and like he has no hopes, and because the run doesn't come back the next morning.
Yeah,
and then he ends like the chapter just thinking about his mom and like thinking like when I got things figured out, I'll go and visit her.
Or he says I'll call her. He's like, I haven't called her. I'll give her a call when everything settles down. But he kind of just like comes to terms with he's like I probably won't be seeing Phyllis again. Like I probably beat her. Like I was thinking it worked because she went out and she was like spiffy again, and she walked out with like a better attitude. But then she obviously didn't come back that night or the next morning. And so he's like, okay, I wonder if she'll ever remember me. Like, I guess I just got to move on.
Yeah. And then
okay.
the last chapter of the section, Robert, I guess we'll tell you about it. So the run actually comes back, and then she comes back and she's made a lot of scratch. And she starts talking about like maybe how she has this new whore that's kind of like fallen in love with her that'll join the stable. And then Slim actually does follow through with the advice that Jones gave him, and he goes and acts like there's like another whore sending in money. And then the runt gets really jealous and then like just humps her ass off, it's described. And then Slim is finally like making some good money. And so he upgrades his apartment, he upgrades his car. And then, some time passes, and then they bring in the new whore that they were talking about, Ophelia. And then she just like wants to work too. And then, Slim is like going off and buying them dresses. And then while all this is happening on, like, it's like his like upward movement like in the world. And
this chapter seemed like a montage of like everything going right for him, right?
Yeah.
Like in his mind, it's like everything's starting to fall into place. It worked out perfectly. Like Sweet Jones's advice worked out perfectly, where Phyllis is fucking like, she's not only like working her ass off, but like she's making so much more money a night. She's making like $150 a night.
Mhm.
Wow.
At one point I looked this up because I was like, okay, I need to look into inflation to see like how much she's bringing in. At one point she says that she brought in, I think she said she brought in, oh damn, I lost the tab. Okay, well, I figured it out earlier, and she brought in like $2,000
Like in a
at
day?
one point. Yeah, and I was like, damn, like that's like that, or like what would be $2,000 in today's
Mhm.
money.
And
But
then so as like Iceberg is buying the girls some dresses, he sees Leroy the horn player just whooping some old man's ass like out in the parking lot. And then they
White dude.
they pull him into the car and then drive him off. And then Slim, like, he notices Chris is there, and then he goes and talks to her. And then Chris is kind of disappointed and says that Leroy's been upset that he didn't get the settlement that he had been talking about, like all this money. And then that guy was like going around kissing people and then kissed her, and then that's why he beat him up so bad. And then Iceberg is like acting like he doesn't want her to be part of the state. He's like, I don't know if I want you around. Like you're like, how does he describe it? Do you remember?
he's like, you're too classy to like, just I don't know, just like I don't think the world of like prostitution is for you. I don't think you could handle it. I have my whores working 16-hour shifts.
Yeah.
And she's like, and so he like reaches across and opens the door to let her out. And he's like, here, I'll give you one C note to, hopefully you can figure out what you need to figure out. But he's just in his head thinking that he's playing her. And she's just like, no, I'll do it.
If pimps were D&D characters like Dungeons and Dragons, I feel like they would be like a master manipulators, or like that would be part of their powers that they got. Robert, did you play your D&D game after all?
Robert, do you know what he's talking about? Nerd.
Yeah, it's a space D&D game, so it's pretty cool.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. The whole first, just getting our characters set up, so it seems like it's going to be a gradual thing.
Oh, nice.
Did you say you recorded it?
Mm-hmm. No.
Oh. Okay. Yeah. Well, that's exactly what happened, and he was able to like just persuade her to like join. Well, because she was gonna have nowhere to go to, right? So like it wasn't like she was like choosing a life with him or like her own like happy life.
Like just
it's like Leroy was gonna get locked up, and she didn't have any money. She didn't have a fucking job or anything. So he was like, maybe I'll let you into my stable, and he's living the good life already. He's upgraded everything, and then it worked out for him too, because he was like perfect, because the fictional person that he had been sending money himself to, he had named Chris out of her, right, or because of her. And then
Perfect.
so he tells Chris, he's like, actually, I have had this prostitute, but she's just died, and my whores know about her, but they don't know that she's died. So maybe I can bring you in, and they won't know that you're not that person, right? And she's like, yeah, let's do it. And that's kind of what happens.
Overall, it was another great section, I would say.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
I don't think there were. I think there, like I mentioned, there were a couple of filler things, but it was all as entertaining. but I think the first episode, like everything felt so pivotal. Like everything seemed like it had to happen to come to where we were. But this is cool, man. I'm honestly looking for redemption. I don't know how much further we're gonna learn about just like how shitty a life everything is.
Kind of like the Notorious B.I.G. movie where the whole movie, again, it's not the real life person, but in the movie he's just like such a shitty person. Like he's abused, like hitting his wife and stuff. And at the end he's like, you know what? We got to make a change. And then guys like pretty much next scene. So it's like, wait. Does that mean like, was that the redemption part that he was like going and making sure to be better? Because he didn't really, So I don't know if this is going to be something, but he does live to be, a lot older than.
I'm not a Notorious B.I.G. fan necessarily. I'm just not super familiar with his work. But I had a roommate in college who was really into him, so he got me to sit down and watch the movie. And I was like, dude, I came out like less of a fan after seeing this. Like he seemed like such a shitty person. So yeah. So I mean, I'm hoping there is redemption. I think I like talked that up a whole lot the first episode. I was like, this is gonna be great. Like I can totally see that there's gonna be such a crazy turnaround.
What if he's like retired and he's like, well, he's just like, no, I just retired. I didn't really learn a lesson. I just stopped. I'm like, oh.
I don't know, I think it's like a fascinating look into like obviously there's all types of human lives that get lived, but I think a lot of people will just like not ever learn about certain aspects of society that are going on, and so it's kind of like the dark underbelly of what's been happening, and for like I think like from where it is in history, and like they were talking about where it's like the first successful Black people in America could have been the pimps. It's just all like so interesting to me.
Yeah, definitely. I do agree. It's just like because it is giving you such a unique look into something that I otherwise would never have dived into.
Also, I mean, I think all of us probably would say that we are like inspired by people who like strive to be great or whatever, and then like he obviously is, and then it's just like in such a like none of us would obviously like want to be pimps or anything.
It's a terrible context, but the drive is the same drive that a Kobe has or a Michael Jordan has.
That just like leaves you with these really conflicted feelings, like when you're reading it, and
it's absolutely conflicting because like it's terrible, of course, but this last chapter I was like, yeah, fuck yeah, Slim, like stuff's coming together now,
like you're finally a pimp.
Yeah, you got three.
Well, it's like when you watch Goodfellas or any movie with the where it's like a gangster or mob or something. It's like you're rooting for them in that context of it, but it's like obviously you're not rooting for what's going on and for all the crap and everything.
And I think it's like he didn't really have like much of a choice, or like what else is we gonna do? Like like I think he was being really earnest in that section when he's like praying to God. Like he just wants like a little bit of a taste of what it feels like, that success that he sees.
Yeah, it really is interesting. I feel like a lot more could be said about that dynamic that I just am not able to speak on. But like the whole like Black experience and what that looks like. Or has looked like to people who have been Black in history, it's a weird thing, man. Like the opportunity, like you think about access to opportunity, and it's like absolutely true that, opportunity has not looked the same to different people in even just this one country, right? In just the last 100 years. This is not that long ago, right? Mm-hmm. It's not like he had a chance to like, he's like, oh, you know what? I think I'm gonna actually leave pimping behind and like take an LSAT and try to go to Harvard Law School. Or,
like I think Black women were only allowed to vote like in like the early 1960s, which is pretty, that isn't far away at all.
Yeah, man. So pretty interesting. It'd be really interesting. I want to see. It'd be interesting to hear what what Black people think about this, right? Like it'd be interesting to hear like Black voices talk about reading this sort of thing.
Hopefully it's also interesting to hear 3 random Vatos talk about it.
Yeah. I wonder, what do you guys think would be the equivalent? Do you think there's an equivalent for like the Mexican experience? Like, do you think there's a book out there or like an experience out there that's been documented?
It probably hasn't been translated.
Yeah, but specifically like the American experience of Mexicans, like the plight of Mexicans in America.
That's what this book makes me wish, is like that we just had histories like through the lens of like Black people, or histories through the lens of like Mexicans in America, like, you know, like American history, but through the lens of like.
Yeah, I mean, I'll admit, dude, I'm not super familiar with like, I'm trying to even think of like historical figures. Like, I mean, I guess like Julio Cesar Chavez is the person that comes to mind when you think of like a struggling Mexican American. But even then, that's not really quite the same, right? That's just like, he was like a labor activist. And but like, I would want to hear like a gritty, I guess I don't even know what the general Mexican American experience is, right? Like I don't know. Like, I just don't know our history, I guess, which is kind of sad.
Yeah, but I mean, it's kind of what we get taught in schools and all.
And I will help with none of that by getting Twilight for the next book.
But maybe some levity would be welcomed.
We'll actually experience the lens of a teenage vampire and how growing up in America is like. But yeah.
Or, you know, I guess like even like seeing what teenagers are interested in, I guess it could be like a different perspective that we don't have anymore, you know, like that access.
Or, you know what would be interesting? Because it is a woman writer and it's specifically on romance, it would be interesting to have like such a different perspective of like love and just like what that is like, you know? Because like we've read The Foundation, which had like no female characters, no perspective from the female characters. We're reading Iceberg Slim, which is like all the women are basically prostitutes who aren't actual.
All of them too, yeah.
Yeah. And so
I think we need a woman writer after all this.
Yeah, we'll just like see what they like. Like all the episodes are just going to be like, well, what does it mean when a man looks at you that way in his period? You know,
a man sparkling out in the sunlight.
Should we end this episode?
Yeah, let's see. I said this last time, but I feel like we should have a better like. All right, and coming to the end of the episode, we're gonna now talk about this
like
thing,
the biggest muscles.
From us?
Yeah.
I do.
I'm not very muscular right now.
Okay.
Man, hey, we should try to get together for the next episode, maybe.
Let's play some basketball.
Yeah.
We will see.
I haven't looked at the numbers, but yeah, I'd be maybe down. But all right, thanks for everyone for tuning in. I hope we got some new fans from Iceberg Slim fans, or maybe just people generally interested in prostitution in the 20th century. And if not, maybe you just like hearing three random Vatos talk about,
Maybe you just went down a rabbit hole and caught us and found us, and you're in that fourth hour of sleep where you have your earphones on and you wake up and you just hear us talking. Like, what the hell am I listening to? And then you stumble upon Art in a cowboy hat on the last episode, and you're like, there's something to this. I find some soothingness to the voice, and yeah.
This is
what I have something going on. Yeah.
All right. Well, much love, happiness, and peace to all of you.
Subscribe.
Good night.